Narcissists make disastrous parents. Their lack of empathy, their need to control everybody, and their compulsion to make everything all about themselves is a perfect recipe to create a myriad of problems that can damage their children both emotionally and physically. In today's video, I'm going to talk about one specific phenomenon that's very common in narcissistic families, and that is of the scapegoat and the golden child. Welcome to Looking Behind the Mirror, where we explore narcissism and take our lives back as we make sense out of nonsense. As a quick disclaimer, everything I say is based on my opinions and my personal experiences. I'm not a professional, and if you're really struggling, I encourage you to seek professional help. I am providing links below for you. In this video, I'm going to explain how scapegoats are created, why they are created, some pitfalls that they can experience in their lives, and ways that they can look at their situation a little differently to hopefully overcome the damage that's caused. And then I'm also going to do the same for the golden child and explain some common misperceptions and misunderstandings that a lot of us might have over what it means to be a golden child and what it's like, and how a golden child is also being abused. First, I want to talk a little bit about why this even happens in the first place. I think for a narcissist, one reason that they will create a scapegoat and a golden child is so that they can escape responsibility, so that they can escape accountability for themselves, the things they're supposed to be taking care of, the things that are actually their fault or things that are a result of something they've done. Having a scapegoat and a golden child is like having tools that you can just offload all of your responsibilities onto. So what do I mean by this? It might seem a little more obvious when we talk about a scapegoat. A scapegoat is just somebody that you blame all your problems on, right? If you are a parent that isn't very good at cleaning the house, well, it's all the scapegoat's fault because they keep you so busy with all the problems they cause that you don't have time to clean, right? Or maybe a narcissist will use the scapegoat to vent. Maybe the narcissist just needs to yell at somebody, and so they make up reasons that the scapegoat is the person that deserves to be yelled at because they can't take responsibility for their own frustrations and their own feelings of anger. They got to blame it on somebody else so that they can just vent without having to deal with their own problems, right? This is pretty clear, pretty straightforward. For the golden child, I think that the golden child is created to offload the responsibilities of being whoever it is they imagine the golden child is. Maybe the golden child is beautiful, or a straight A student, or captain of the football team, or just clever. Maybe the personality is just what the narcissist wishes they could be, right? So the narcissist can somehow create this legacy for themselves, this fantasy of what their child is supposed to be, what they can take credit for having created. They can offload the responsibility of who they should have made themselves to be, or who they think they should have been, offload this onto the child. Well, now it's the child's job to get straight A's, or now it's the child's job to be beautiful or witty or athletic, whatever. The parent could also offload actual responsibilities. Maybe the golden child has the responsibility to help raise younger siblings. Maybe that's how they achieve the status of being the golden child, because they're such a good little parent, little mommy, or whatever. When actually the things the golden child is being expected to do are the responsibility of the parent. So that's just one reason that a narcissist will create a golden child and a scapegoat, so that they can offload their responsibilities and they can shift all the blame and responsibility for themselves onto their children. They also just do this because narcissists create this fantasy in their head of what it means to be a parent. Narcissists are living in a fantasy world where they are playing a role in a movie that's all about themselves, and everybody in this movie is playing a supporting role in a story that's all about the narcissist. So if you are the child of a narcissist, they don't recognize your autonomy. They don't recognize that you are a unique human being that is going to be your own person, and that nobody can predict what kind of person you're going to be. This is something that should be discovered over time. A narcissist can't really understand that, and they are not interested in doing so. To them, you are their creation. You belong to them. They own you. You're supposed to be filling some role in their head that they've already created. They are not interested in getting to know who you are because they've already decided who you're supposed to be. You are supposed to fit one of these roles that they have fantasized about that's going to make them look like the parent that they imagine they are, that's going to make them look good and feel good about themselves. If you can't fit into one of these boxes, they feel like they've been robbed, cheated, that you've come along and taken all these resources from them, and then you couldn't even give them back what you owed them. You owed them to play this role that they made up for you in their head. Narcissists often have this idea that their children are going to be a legacy, and this is why a lot of them will support the golden child so much, will bail them out of mistakes they've made, will prop them up, will just throw endless resources at this golden child because they're trying to create a legacy that's supposed to reflect on them. And if you, as their child, can't fulfill this role that they've imagined for you, in their mind, there's really nothing else useful for you to do but to become the scapegoat. At least that's something that's useful for them. At least then you can fill some role that they need you for. They can just blame everything on you. And I think one more reason that narcissists will create scapegoats in a golden child is to pit them against each other. This is another way that they can shift blame and shift responsibility onto their children. If their children are constantly fighting with each other or resenting each other, then it distracts them from the true culprit of the problems in their lives. It distracts them from the fact that the parent is the one who is harming them and who is teaching them these toxic roles that they're playing. It's a way that the narcissist escapes responsibility and accountability and shifts it again onto their children. So how does somebody become a scapegoat? I kind of already went into this a little as I described the fantasy that a narcissist has in their head of who their child's supposed to be or who that child is in their imagination. I don't think they can understand the idea that being a person is complicated, that we all have natural tendencies, that there are things that we like and that we don't like. To a narcissist, it's simple. I imagined this fantasy person in my head that my son or my daughter was supposed to be. How hard is it for you to be that person, right? I wanted my child to have straight A's in school. How hard is it? Is that so much to ask that you get straight A's, or is it so much to ask that you're athletic, that you're the captain of the football team? That's all I ask of you, and you owe that to me because I'm your parent. I don't think narcissists have any concept of how ridiculously unreasonable their expectations are, or even how impossible their expectations can be to fill. So when their children are unable to fit any of these boxes, the narcissist feels like they have a right to take their frustrations out on their children. They feel like their child has failed them and that their child deserves to be punished for that. They don't see how unfair this is, and they don't care. I don't think they're willing to look at how unfair they are being, and I don't think they care about this. They just feel so frustrated, so wronged, and their ego feels so threatened by this thing that was supposed to boost their ego up so much, failing them so hard. They feel so wronged, so victimized by this, that they're unwilling to take even a second to stop and think about how much damage they're doing to somebody they are actually responsible for, how much damage they're doing to an innocent person who looks to them for love and support and an idea of how relationships work in the world. If you are the scapegoat of a narcissist, to the narcissist, you are to blame for this failure. You are to blame for how disappointed they are that you didn't magically become this fantasy person in their head. How could you do this to them? How could you grow into your own person? How could you have strengths and weaknesses that they didn't assign to you? They didn't approve of your personality. They didn't approve of the things that you like to do in your spare time. And I also want to add that sometimes there's not even a real reason for the scapegoat to become the scapegoat. Sometimes the narcissist just needs somebody to fill this role. So if the narcissist has two children and one of them is really good at playing the piano or whatever, maybe it's just convenient to find ways to use the other child as a scapegoat. Narcissists see everybody through the utility that they see in them. They look at everyone in their lives for what they can get out of that person, how they can use that person to their benefit, and their children are no exception. So maybe they look at the child that's really good at playing the piano and they think, yeah, I think what I can get out of this child is really feed into this talent for the piano, spend a bunch of money on it, have everybody listen to them play, buy them the best piano in the world, and this will make me look good as a parent. It'll make me feel good about myself as I pretend that I had something to do with this talent that my child has, right? And now, okay, well, what do I do with this other kid over here? You know, I really needed somebody to blame everything on. I can't blame everything on this perfect piano playing child. I mean, their role is to make me look good. That's the use I get out of this child. So what use can I get out of this other child? I can blame them for everything, and they can just invent things that maybe if this child who becomes the scapegoat had been an only child, maybe they would have become a golden child, because maybe that would have been their best use to the narcissist. But because the narcissist already has a golden child, well, now they need to come up with something else. And maybe the scapegoat was the best use the parent had for this particular child. So if you were the scapegoat in your family, it wasn't even necessarily because of anything to do with your personality or your preferences or your talents or your strengths or weaknesses. It might have just been the most convenient use that your parent had for you. It might have had absolutely nothing to do with you at all. Now, as the scapegoat, I think, from what I've observed in my life anyway, that the biggest pitfall, the greatest obstacle to overcome, is to learn to stop chasing that approval and that love, to learn to let go of this need to be accepted by somebody who will never accept you. Because as the scapegoat, in order for the narcissistic parent to finally give you approval and love, they've either got to switch their utility of you into that role, which is still not love, or they have to admit that they've been unfair with you. They have to admit that their expectations have been wrong, and they're never going to do that. Also, they need to find somebody else to fit this role of scapegoat if they're going to release you from that role. And, you know, they're probably not going to do that either, unless they have another kid that happens to make a handy scapegoat. And really, in my opinion, a narcissistic parent that does this to their child isn't worth this effort, doesn't deserve for the scapegoated child to keep trying to please them, to keep throwing energy away on this narcissistic parent that is never going to see them or appreciate them for who they really are. I don't think a narcissistic parent like this deserves any of this effort. It really makes me sad to see somebody throw their life away clamoring over this attention and approval that, even if they received it, just really doesn't mean anything. For somebody to completely lose who they are. For a child who was a scapegoat to grow into an adult that takes over the job of blaming themselves for everything from their parent, that continues to validate this idea that nothing they do is ever good enough and they've got to keep trying, or they're not worth anything. If they can't get their parent to validate them and approve of them, then they really aren't worth anything. I think that's really sad. So I think the greatest challenge for somebody that grew up as the scapegoat is to learn to validate your own self-worth and to learn to honor who you really are, who you really wanted to be, and to understand that you were always good enough. You always deserved the love of your parent. You didn't do anything wrong, and you certainly didn't do anything to deserve the rejection and the blame that you had to grow up with. It wasn't your fault, and it certainly wasn't because there was anything wrong with who you naturally were as a human being. So I think that's the greatest challenge for somebody that grew up as the scapegoat, is to let go of this constant chasing of the parents' approval and learn to approve of yourself. Now I'm going to talk about the golden child and ways that I think that this is misunderstood. It can be easy to look at this dynamic and think that the golden child was loved while the scapegoat was not loved. But in reality, neither of these children really received authentic love. The golden child just happened to fit some fantasy role that the parent made up in their head. That does not mean that that was naturally who the golden child was. So maybe the golden child was capable of getting straight A's, or capable of being captain of the football team, or maybe they were capable of being witty and having a really sparkling personality, but maybe that wasn't naturally who they would have wanted to be. Maybe they would have wanted to spend time on something other than getting straight A's in school, or maybe they didn't want to play football, but they just had the talent to be really good at it. But maybe this wasn't who they really wanted to be. Maybe they created a witty, sparkling personality to please their parent, but this really wasn't an authentic reflection of who they really were. Maybe they would have preferred to be more of an introvert, but they did this, they created this persona in order to earn the love of a parent who really wasn't giving them love at all, but conditional acceptance. Whoever fills this role of the golden child can have different degrees of awareness of what's going on, but I think they all know on some level at least that this love is conditional, and that if they step out of line, if they stop putting on this witty personality, or if they stop being beautiful for, maybe something happens to them and they lose their physical beauty, or if they decide not to play football or whatever, they know that that means their parent is going to stop loving them. I just think that most golden children don't consciously realize that that's not love and that there's something wrong with that. I think growing up with this conditioning teaches you that that's just the way the world works, that if you want to be loved and accepted, you have to jump through these hoops. And if you can't make it through those hoops, well, you don't really deserve to be loved anyway. So you better keep jumping through them. You better keep trying. I think both the golden child and the scapegoat can both get stuck in cycles of trying and trying and trying to earn love, trying to get approval, trying to be good enough. But the only difference is, for some reason, which could be completely random, the golden child is hitting those marks while the scapegoat is not. That doesn't mean that either child is really being loved. And both of these children can be greatly damaged by this conditional acceptance that they have to constantly try so hard to earn. I think both of these roles can result in the true authentic self of both of these types of children to be completely obliterated. Both the scapegoat and the golden child can completely lose touch with who they are. The scapegoat might just feel completely ashamed of who they are, as they are constantly told what a failure and a disappointment they are. They might feel very ashamed of who they are, and they might be constantly trying to reinvent themselves, constantly trying to bury their authentic self, while the golden child might be doing exactly the same thing as they learn that the person that they authentically are, the person that they authentically want to be, isn't good enough. It's not going to cut it. They have to pretend to be this witty person, or they have to play football, or they have to be beautiful, or whatever it is. They have to do that, and their true self is also obliterated and buried in the narcissist's fantasies of who their children are supposed to be. And this is why the golden child and the scapegoat are both capable of becoming narcissists themselves. They're also both capable of growing from this and overcoming these emotional traumas and damages that their parents have put on them. But they're also both capable of becoming narcissists themselves, because they are both taught that their authentic selves are not enough, and they're both taught that they have to be something they're not. They have to create a fake persona in order to be found acceptable in the world. They're also both taught that their self-worth is determined by somebody else, that in order to feel any self-worth, they have to have external validation, which is something the narcissists themselves are completely stuck in. I think in some ways this can affect the golden child in an even more powerful way, because the golden child was more successful at earning this love. So they may be stuck in this mentality of, I have to keep doing this. I have to keep being good enough and hitting these marks in order to feel good about myself, because this is actually working for me. If I get straight A's, or if I play football good enough, then I'm going to be rewarded with validation and acceptance and love. And that's going to keep me on this hamster wheel of continuing to fill this role, continuing to do all these things I'm supposed to do to make people happy, because that's how I earn love. And it actually works for me. I actually do receive love and validation, but that becomes the only way that a golden child knows to earn self-worth, or to feel any self-worth, is to earn it from external validation. And they never really get a chance to learn how to build their own sense of self-worth and how to honor and love who they really authentically are, who they would have been if they had been encouraged to just develop as who they wanted to be. I think for a scapegoat, because this constant desire and effort to be good enough to earn approval or love was unsuccessful, it never really worked. They're going to develop their own problems that way. They might go through life just feeling like nothing they do is ever good enough. Why try? But they're also not going to get stuck on this hamster wheel of constantly hitting that mark over and over again, because that's the only way they know how to feel worthy of acceptance. I also want to say that this dynamic isn't limited to just the family. You can see this a lot in a workplace atmosphere that is being controlled by a narcissistic person. A narcissistic boss or owner will often make golden child or golden employee and a scapegoat in the workplace in order to maintain control and to offload responsibility for their own mistakes and their own responsibilities. And I think especially in a workplace, these roles are a lot more fluid. As the golden child or golden employee, you can quickly find yourself turning into a scapegoat. And I think this can happen as a child, but it's maybe not quite as fluid. But you can go from a golden child to a scapegoat very quickly. And I think nothing will make you shift these roles quicker than seeing through the narcissist's lies. So as the child of a narcissist, or as the employee of a narcissist, when you start to see the truth for what it is, when you start to understand that you're actually being used and manipulated, and that none of this love or approval is really authentic, that it's all something that the narcissist is using to serve their own needs, that the narcissist is actually controlling all of this and is being emotionally abusive, really. When you start to see this for what it is, and you stop seeing the narcissist as this infallible, admirable human being that their approval means everything to you, when you stop looking at it that way, that's when you end up on the scapegoat list, like in an instant. And you may be convinced that you did something to deserve that. Just like somebody who's always been a scapegoat might believe that it really is because they deserve it. It really is because of some great failing that they have. So the message that I'd like for any of you that have experienced either of these roles to take away from this video is that none of this was your fault. This was not your failing. This was the failing of somebody who was supposed to nurture you, who was supposed to help you get to know who you were, who wasn't supposed to dictate who that person was. This was not your failing. And this goes for anyone who was a golden child who then later started to develop some understanding of what happened to them. Sometimes may start to develop some shame for maybe the way they treated people, or maybe the way they fed into the golden child scapegoat dynamic. There can be a lot of shame associated with realizing how much the narcissist used you to achieve their cruel, unfair objective. And I want you to know that that's not your fault either, and that you can take responsibility for the choices you made and move forward. No one experiencing either of these roles asked to be put into these roles. This was the failing of somebody who did not have the maturity or the emotional capacity to fulfill the role that they had. And while if your parent did this to you, they may not have the emotional capacity or the emotional tools or the willingness to ever outgrow the things that compelled them to do this to their own child. But you, watching this video, it's not too late for you. You can outgrow what they have done to you. I hope this helps. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and comment below any ideas you have for me for future videos. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you like this video and would like to see more like it in the future. Until next time, thanks. Bye.